There is a force older than civilization itself, a force that has toppled empires, inspired masterpieces, and reduced the most rational men to quivering shadows of themselves. It whispers in the space between a glance and a heartbeat. It binds without rope, enslaves without chains, and possesses without touch. The ancient Greeks called it Eros, the god of desire, the child of chaos who strikes with golden arrows and leaves mortals bleeding devotion. But Carl Jung saw something darker beneath the mythology. He discovered that when a man falls under the spell of a woman, he is not truly seeing her at all. He is staring into the mirror of his own soul, hypnotized by a projection he himself created. This is the Eros trap, a psychological mechanism so subtle, so ancient, that most men live and die without ever recognizing the invisible puppet strings controlling their deepest longings. Jung spent decades mapping the labyrinth of the male psyche, and what he found was both terrifying and liberating. The woman you think you love may be nothing more than a ghost conjured by your unconscious mind. Tonight, we descend into the hidden architecture of desire. We'll explore Jung's lost insights on the Anima, the feminine image that every man carries within, and reveal why attraction so often transforms into obsession, why love feels like fate, and how to break free from emotional possession without sacrificing your capacity for genuine connection. By the end of this journey, you'll understand the invisible contract between masculine desire and feminine power. You'll recognize the trap, and perhaps for the first time, you'll see clearly enough to escape it. In first chapter, we'll talk about the myth of Eros and Psyche, why desire feels divine. Before Jung, before psychology, before the age of reason, there was myth. And in the ancient story of Eros and Psyche, the Greeks encoded a truth about love that modern science is only beginning to rediscover. The myth goes like this. Psyche was a mortal woman so beautiful that people began worshiping her instead of Aphrodite, goddess of love. Enraged by this insult, Aphrodite commanded her son Eros to make Psyche fall in love with the most wretched creature alive. But when Eros saw Psyche, he was struck by his own arrow. The god of desire became desire's prisoner. Eros took Psyche to a hidden palace where he visited her only in darkness, forbidding her ever to look upon his face. Night after night, she felt his presence, heard his voice, experienced the ecstasy of divine love, but never truly saw him. Her sisters, consumed by jealousy, convinced her that her mysterious lover must be a monster. So one night, while Eros slept, Psyche lit a lamp. The moment light touched his face, hot oil from her lamp fell upon his shoulder. Eros awoke and fled, wounded by her betrayal. Psyche had broken the one condition of their love. She had tried to see what she was only meant to feel. Jung understood that this myth contains the entire psychology of romantic projection. Eros represents the unconscious masculine principle of desire, passionate, blind, struck by forces beyond rational control. Psyche embodies the feminine principle of consciousness, the impulse to illuminate, to understand, to see clearly. But here's the crucial insight. Their love could only exist in darkness. The moment consciousness arrived, the spell broke. This is why falling in love feels divine, why it arrives like revelation, why it seems to bypass every defense mechanism of the rational mind. Because in those early stages, you're not relating to a real person. You're experiencing a sacred encounter with an archetype, a god image projected from the deepest layers of your psyche. The Greeks knew what Jung would later prove. Desire doesn't begin in the body or even in the heart. It erupts from the unconscious like magma from the Earth's core, carrying ancient patterns that predate your personal history. When you feel that lightning bolt of attraction, when a stranger's face seems somehow familiar, when you become convinced that this particular woman holds the key to your happiness, you're not experiencing reality. You're experiencing mythology in real time. And just like in the myth, the relationship between consciousness and desire is one of fundamental tension. To love is to remain partially blind. To see clearly is to risk shattering the spell. This paradox, that we must not look too closely at what we most desire, creates the psychological trap that Jung would spend his life attempting to map. The ancients encoded this wisdom in story. Jung translated it into psychology, but the trap remains, waiting for every man who mistakes the goddess in his mind for the woman standing before him. Chapter 2. Jung's map of the Anima, the unseen woman within. Carl Jung's most revolutionary and most disturbing discovery was this: every man carries a woman inside him. Not metaphorically, not poetically, but as an actual psychological structure, a living complex with its own intelligence, its own agenda, and its own terrifying autonomy. He called her the Anima, Latin for soul, and he argued that she is the single most powerful force shaping a man's emotional and romantic life. She is the invisible woman, the eternal feminine, the image of womanhood that your psyche constructed long before you ever met a real woman. The Anima is formed in the darkness of early childhood, assembled from fragments of your mother, grandmother, sisters, fairy tales, and the collective inheritance of masculine psychology spanning thousands of generations. She is the distilled essence of everything feminine that your psyche has encountered, rejected, desired, and feared. But here's what makes the Anima so dangerous. She doesn't stay confined to fantasy. She projects outward. When you meet a woman who even partially matches this internal template, your psyche performs a magic trick so seamless you never notice it's happening. It overlays the Anima image onto the real woman's face, like a filter you can't remove. Suddenly, this stranger before you seems to glow with otherworldly significance. She becomes fascinating, mysterious, essential. You think you're seeing her, but you're actually seeing your own soul reflected back, wearing her face like a mask. Jung identified 4 stages of Anima development, each corresponding to a different archetype of femininity. Eve represents the purely biological, instinctual feminine, mother, nurturer, provider of comfort and physical satisfaction. A man operating at this level seeks a woman to take care of him, to be his mother substitute, to meet his basic needs without challenging his development. Helen embodies romantic and aesthetic femininity, the woman as muse, as beauty incarnate, as the object of courtly love. This is the stage of idealization, where the woman becomes art, poetry, the inspiration for great works and greater obsessions. Most modern romantic love fixates at this level. Mary represents the spiritual feminine, the woman as redeemer, as moral compass, as sacred vessel. Here she becomes a religious figure, someone whose love can save or sanctify. Men at this stage worship their partners, seeking salvation through feminine grace. Sophia is the final stage: wisdom, wholeness, integration. At this level, the Anima is no longer projected outward, but recognized as an internal guide, a bridge between consciousness and the unconscious depths. Most men never progress beyond the first 2 stages. They spend their entire lives seeking Eve or Helen, looking for a woman to either comfort them like mother or inspire them like a goddess. They never recognize that what they're truly seeking cannot be found in another person because it exists only within themselves. Jung wrote in his private notes, "The Anima wants to reconcile and unite. She is a function of relationship par excellence, but she is also the witch, the seducer, the one who leads men into the swamp of their own unconscious desires. She promises integration, but delivers possession. This is the fundamental tragedy of the Anima. She is simultaneously the path to wholeness and the mechanism of enchantment. She shows you what you lack, what you need to become complete, but she shows it to you out there, in the form of another person, when the truth is that what you're seeking has been inside you all along. Every time you become obsessed with a woman, every time you feel that addictive pull towards someone who seems to complete you, every time you become convinced that this relationship will finally make you whole, your Anima is projecting. She's painting your own inner feminine onto someone else's canvas, and you're falling in love with your own artwork. The real woman beneath the projection, she might be wonderful, she might be terrible, but you'll never truly know her until you withdraw the projection and see her as she actually is, rather than as your psyche needs her to be. And that's where the trap tightens, because withdrawing the projection feels like losing love itself. Chapter 3. Projection and Possession. How the Mind Creates Its Lover. The mechanism of projection is psychology's darkest magic trick. It happens in the space between perception and reality, where the mind quietly replaces what is with what must be. Here's how it works. Your unconscious psyche contains everything you've repressed, denied, or failed to integrate about yourself. Qualities, emotions, potentials that you've exiled from consciousness because they didn't fit your self-image. For men, much of what gets repressed are qualities coded as feminine. Emotionality, intuition, receptivity, vulnerability, the capacity for deep feeling and irrational knowing. These rejected parts don't disappear. They coalesce into the Anima complex, forming a kind of second personality that lives in your unconscious. And because she's unconscious, you can't see her directly. You can only see her when she appears out there, reflected in the faces of women you encounter. Jung called this psychic projection, the mind's tendency to perceive its own unconscious contents as belonging to external objects or people. It's why we see faces in clouds, patterns in randomness, meaning in coincidence. The psyche is a projection machine, constantly casting its inner contents onto the outer world. In romantic attraction, this mechanism goes into overdrive. When you meet a woman who even partially resonates with your anima image, your unconscious seizes the opportunity. It says, here is the missing piece. This woman contains what I lack. And in that moment, something catastrophic happens. You stop seeing the real woman and start seeing your own soul wearing her face. The symptoms are unmistakable. You become convinced she's different from other women, more authentic, more aligned with your values, more meant for you. Coincidences seem to prove that fate brought you together. Her flaws become endearing quirks. Her presence produces an emotional intensity you've never experienced before. When she's near, you feel more yourself, as if she activates some dormant potential within you. But here's the devastating truth. All of that intensity, all that sense of recognition and completion, it has nothing to do with her. It's your own disowned femininity calling out to be integrated. Your anima is using her as a screen onto which to project herself, creating the illusion that this external woman holds the key to your internal wholeness. This is why the beginning of romantic relationships feels so transcendent, so ecstatic, so absolutely certain. You're not just falling in love with a person. You're having a numinous encounter with your own unconscious. You're meeting the God image, the archetype, the eternal feminine principle that your psyche has been building since childhood. The Greeks would have recognized this state immediately. They called it enthusiasmos, being filled with the God. You are literally possessed by the anima, taken over by an archetypal force that uses your ego as a puppet, and possession, by definition, means loss of control. When you're under the anima's spell, you make decisions your rational mind would never approve. You ignore red flags. You sacrifice your goals, your friendships, your very identity to maintain the connection with this woman who seems to hold the key to your completion. You become her prisoner, not because she's enslaving you, but because your own psyche is using her as the anchor for your projection. Jung warned that men under the anima's possession display specific symptoms: unexplained mood swings, hypersensitivity to the woman's emotional states, irrational jealousy, obsessive thoughts, the inability to concentrate on anything else. They become emotionally volatile, swinging between ecstatic idealization and bitter resentment. Their relationships become dramatic, intense, unstable, because they're not actually in a relationship with a real person. They're in a relationship with a ghost, with a projection, with their own unconscious. The cruelest aspect of projection is that it makes genuine intimacy impossible. Real love requires seeing the other person as they actually are. Separate, autonomous, neither savior nor enemy, but simply human. But projection replaces the real person with a fantasy figure. You fall in love not with who she is, but with who your psyche needs her to be, and when she inevitably fails to match the projection, when she reveals herself to be merely human rather than the goddess you imagined, the spell doesn't break cleanly. Instead, the projection flips. The idealized anima becomes the devouring mother, the witch, the betrayer. Love transforms into resentment. Obsession becomes bitter disappointment. This is why so many romantic relationships follow the same tragic arc: intense attraction and idealization, followed by increasing conflict as reality intrudes, ending in bitter disillusionment where both parties wonder how they ever loved someone so wrong for them. The relationship didn't fail because the people were incompatible. It failed because it was never really a relationship at all, just two people caught in the crossfire of their own projections, trying to love ghosts that happened to be standing in the same room. Chapter 4. The Trap. Why men fall for symbols, not souls. The Eros trap closes the moment you confuse the symbol for the reality, the map for the territory, the projection for the person. And it's a trap that evolution itself has designed, baited with the most powerful lure imaginable: the promise of wholeness. Here's the evolutionary logic. Your psyche is trying to help you. The Anima projection isn't a malfunction, it's a feature. By making you fall obsessively in love, your unconscious is trying to force you into intimacy, into relationship, into the very experiences that will challenge and develop you. The projection creates the magnetic pull necessary to overcome your defenses and drive you towards psychological growth. But evolution doesn't care about your happiness. It cares about reproduction and development. So it gives you a mechanism that feels like destiny but actually operates through deception. The trap has several layers, each more subtle than the last. Layer 1. The addiction to projection. Itself, once you've experienced the intensity of projected love, that sense of cosmic recognition, of having found the one, ordinary affection seems pale and insufficient. You become addicted to the high of archetypal encounter, constantly seeking that lightning bolt attraction that signals your anima has found a new screen. Men caught in this layer become serial romantics, moving from one intense relationship to another, always convinced that this time they've found the real thing, never recognizing that they're chasing the same ghost in different disguises. Layer 2. The sacrifice of identity under the anima's possession. You begin to reshape yourself to maintain the projection. If she seems to love your artistic side, you become an artist. If she values emotional openness, you perform vulnerability. Slowly, imperceptibly, you trade your authentic self for a role that sustains her interest, or more accurately, that sustains your projection onto her. This is why breakups often feel like dying. You're not just losing a relationship, you're losing the entire identity you constructed to maintain the fantasy. Layer 3. The power dynamic here is where Jung's insight becomes truly uncomfortable. The Anima projection gives women enormous, unconscious power over men. Not because women are consciously manipulating anyone, but because men under projection are literally unable to see clearly. When you've projected your anima onto a woman, her approval becomes your access to your own soul. Her rejection feels like self-rejection. Her moods control your moods. Her withdrawal feels like abandonment by the divine feminine itself. You've given her the keys to your inner kingdom without even realizing it. This creates a silent, invisible power differential where the man becomes dependent on the woman's presence for his own sense of completeness. She becomes the gatekeeper to his emotional life, the one who can grant or withhold access to his own inner feminine. And because the projection is unconscious, you can't simply think your way out of it. Knowing intellectually that you're projecting does almost nothing to dispel the projection itself. The anima operates in the realm of image and emotion, beyond the reach of rational analysis. Layer 4. The false promise. The deepest layer of the trap is this. The anima projection promises integration, but delivers only dependency. It shows you a vision of wholeness. You plus this woman equals completeness. But it's a lie. The wholeness you seek cannot be achieved through union with another person because what you're actually seeking is union with your own disowned femininity. Real integration would mean withdrawing the projection, recognizing the anima as an internal figure, and developing those feminine qualities within yourself. It would mean becoming emotionally whole, psychologically androgynous, no longer needing a woman to carry the feminine half of your psyche, But that path requires facing everything you've repressed, accepting the parts of yourself you've rejected, undertaking the long, painful work of individuation. The projection offers a shortcut. Just find the right woman and she'll make you whole. It's a beautiful lie. And it keeps most men trapped in an endless cycle of romantic seeking, forever looking outward for what can only be found within. Jung wrote, "The meeting with the Anima is a test of courage, an ordeal by fire for the masculine mind. For she is both guide and destroyer, the one who shows the way to wholeness, and the one who leads men into the labyrinth of their own longing, where most wander lost until death. The trap is designed to feel like salvation. That's what makes it perfect." Chapter 5. The Integration, Escaping the Eros Spell. Liberation from the Eros trap doesn't mean killing desire or becoming emotionally invulnerable. It means learning to love consciously, with eyes open, able to distinguish between the woman before you and the goddess in your mind. Jung's path to integration is neither simple nor quick. It requires nothing less than a complete restructuring of how you relate to your own psyche, your emotions, and the feminine principle itself. But for those willing to undertake the journey, the rewards are extraordinary. The capacity for genuine intimacy, freedom from compulsive attraction, and access to your own wholeness without needing another person to complete you. Stage 1. Recognition. The first step is the hardest, recognizing when you're under projection. This requires brutal honesty and constant vigilance. Ask yourself these diagnostic questions. Does this woman seem somehow more than other women? More authentic, more aligned with your values, uniquely suited to understand you? That's projection. Do you feel more alive, more yourself, more complete in her presence? That's the Anima activating through the projection. Do coincidences seem to prove that fate brought you together? That's the unconscious weaving a mythological narrative. Do you ignore contradictions in her behavior or character because the overall feeling of the relationship seems so right? That's the projection overriding your conscious judgment. The moment you recognize projection, you've already begun to weaken it. Consciousness is poison to the unconscious spell. Stage 2. Active imagination. Jung's primary technique for withdrawing projection was active imagination, a method of directly engaging the Anima as an internal figure rather than seeking her in external women. The practice is simple but profound. Find a quiet space. Close your eyes. Invite the Anima to appear in your imagination as she truly is, not as any specific woman you know, but as the feminine presence within your own psyche. What does she look like? What does she say? What does she want from you? What gifts does she bring? What warnings? At first, she may appear as women you've loved or desired. That's natural. But as the practice deepens, she'll begin to show herself as distinct from any external person. An autonomous figure with her own intelligence, her own messages, her own reality. Through this dialogue, you develop a conscious relationship with your own inner feminine. You give her the attention she's been demanding by creating those intense attractions. You integrate her wisdom without needing to project her onto someone else. Stage 3. Developing your own femininity, the Anima projects because there are feminine qualities in yourself that remain undeveloped. Emotional depth, intuitive knowing, the capacity for receptivity and vulnerability, creative expression, the ability to simply be rather than always doing. Integration means consciously developing these qualities within yourself. It means learning to access your own emotions without needing a woman to draw them out. It means developing your intuition, your creativity, your capacity for emotional presence. This isn't about becoming feminized or losing masculine identity. It's about becoming psychologically whole, having access to both masculine and feminine modes of being rather than remaining lopsided, projecting half of your psyche onto external women. Stage 4. Seeing clearly. As projection withdraws, something remarkable happens. You begin to see actual women clearly for the first time. No longer obscured by the Anima's overlay, they appear as they truly are, neither goddesses nor demons, but human beings with their own complexities, their own wounds, their own journeys toward wholeness. And here's the paradox Jung discovered. Only when you stop needing a woman to complete can you truly love one. Real love becomes possible only when projection falls away, when you can see the other as genuinely other, not as a reflection of your own psyche. This doesn't mean attraction disappears. It means attraction becomes clean, direct, reality-based, rather than fantasy-based. You're drawn to who someone actually is, rather than to who your unconscious needs them to be. Stage 5. Relationship as practice. The highest integration comes when you enter relationship consciously, knowing that projection will still arise, but now having the tools to work with it. Every time you notice yourself falling into old patterns, idealizing, becoming obsessive, losing yourself in another, you have an opportunity to withdraw the projection, to differentiate between the real person and your inner image. Relationship becomes a spiritual practice, a constant opportunity to choose consciousness over possession, reality over fantasy, genuine intimacy over the comfortable illusion of. Carl Jung believed that a truly mature relationship between a man and woman requires both partners to have completed this work, to have integrated their respective anima and animus, the masculine complex in women. So they meet as two whole beings rather than as fragmented parts seeking completion through the other. This is rare. Most relationships remain unconscious theaters where two people act out archetypal dramas without ever recognizing the script they're following. But for those who do the work, who face the anima directly and integrate her wisdom, a different possibility emerges. Love without possession, desire without addiction, intimacy without the loss of self. The final mystery, Jung's last word on the anima, contains both warning and promise. He wrote, "The anima is the face the unconscious turns toward consciousness. She is the guide to the inner world, but also its greatest danger. To know her is to stand at the threshold between the human and the divine, between slavery and freedom. The Eros trap will always exist. The anima will always project. The pull of romantic obsession will always tempt you toward unconsciousness. This is the eternal human condition, the price we pay for being creatures of both consciousness and instinct. But once you've seen the mechanism, once you understand the trap, you're no longer completely at its mercy. You can choose. You can love with eyes open. You can experience desire without being enslaved by it. The goddess in your mind will always be there, ancient and beautiful and terrible, but she no longer has to wear a stranger's face. She can become what Jung always knew she was meant to be, not a projection onto external women, but an internal guide, a bridge to the depths, the living symbol of wholeness that exists and has always existed within yourself. For ending, we have the choice. Every man stands at this crossroads, whether he knows it or not. You can continue living under the spell, moving from one projected love to another, forever seeking the goddess in different disguises, never recognizing that you're chasing your own reflection. Or you can do what Jung insisted was the highest work of human development. Turn inward, face the anima directly, integrate what she represents, and in doing so, free both yourself and the women in your life from the tyranny of unconscious projection. The trap is real. The mechanism is ancient. The pull is powerful. But consciousness, once achieved, cannot be lost. And in consciousness lies the only true escape from the Eros trap. Not by fleeing from love, but by learning to love truly, to see clearly, to stand free in the presence of desire without being consumed by it. The woman you think you love is not the woman standing before you. She's the mirror your psyche has been waiting your entire life to look into. The question is, are you ready to finally see what's really there?